A tropical storm had been thundering all night, the rain pounding against the side of Vickie Yarborough's home in Tupelo, Mississippi. Her 13-year-old daughter, Leigh Occhi, slept beside her bed as she was afraid of storms. Vickie got ready for work, and Leigh woke up to speak with her mother. When Vickie was leaving at 7:35 a.m., Leigh was still in her nightgown, but she promised her mother she would be dressed and ready to go when her grandmother came to pick her up later that morning. Hurricane Andrew still raged on as the car pulled away. Little did Vickie know that the storm would be the least of her worries. In this episode of Seriously Strange, we cover the mysterious and tragic disappearance of Leigh Occhi. This episode is sponsored by Homescapes. Let's be honest, you've heard of them. The free-to-play puzzle game by Playrix, one of the big three of mobile gaming. You know, come on, we all know. But what you may not have known is that Homescapes is eerier than you think. Go down in the description below and hit the link or use the QR code to download Homescapes now. Each person who downloads it earns a thumbs up from me. Isn't that great? That's so good. Join Austin the butler as he returns to his ancestral home, an old mansion filled with mysteries and secrets, and it's your job to renovate it, not only return it to its former glory, but exceed its former glory. Yet it's not all fun and games. Well, actually it is. It's literally a game the whole time, and it's fun, so I guess that kind of made no sense. There are secrets within these old dilapidated walls. Is the mansion as quiet as it seems? Spoiler alert, nope, it isn't. You're going to quickly find out that there's more to this old mansion than meets the eye. From interesting creatures to ancient artifacts, there's always something new just around the corner. With a captivating storyline to carry you along the way, you'll soon realize Homescapes is rather different from other mobile games, which is why it has over 100 million downloads. Are you kidding? So join Austin and the cast of quirky characters and find out the mysteries of the mansion and so much more with Homescapes by hitting the link in the description below or using the QR code. This video is made possible by Homescapes, so when you download Homescapes, you're directly helping me bring more content to all of you. So thank you tremendously to all of you who do, and thanks for listening. Vickie Felton and Donald Occhi were both members of the military and met when stationed in California in 1976. After just a year of dating, they were married. They transferred to a military base in Honolulu, Hawaii. It was there that Leigh Occhi was born on August 21st, 1979. Sadly, her parents' marriage came to an end in 1981, with the pair citing irreconcilable differences. Daniel relocated to Germany with the military, while Vickie left the armed forces and moved with Leigh to Tupelo to be closer to her family. Leigh was known as being kind and outgoing. She loved horseback riding and was well known for her love of animals. She had blonde hair and hazel eyes and was considered to be well loved by her family. She maintained a close relationship with her father despite the distance. One summer, she even traveled to Germany, and the pair explored the country together. When Donald was transferred to Arlington County, Virginia, father and daughter spent more time together, and he even taught Leigh how to shoot guns. From outward appearances, Leigh was a typical 13-year-old little girl. She was a good student, she loved pizza, and she even had a boy she was interested in. These facts likely made the events of August 27, 1992, all the more tragic. Over breakfast on the morning of August 27th, Vickie and Leigh talked about the upcoming school year and their plans for the day. Leigh was supposed to go to an open house at her middle school where she would be soon starting 8th grade. She would be attending the event with her grandma that afternoon, then go to Taco Bell for dinner after. According to Vickie, there was no indication that anything was wrong with Leigh. The only unusual thing was that this was the first time Leigh would be left home for the day, from morning until being picked up in the afternoon. Vickie was not the type of mother to not take precautions with the safety of her daughter. Vickie and Leigh had worked out a ring pattern so that when she called, Leigh would know it was her mom and pick up. Vickie would ring twice, hang up, and then call back. When she heard the weather report and knew her daughter's fear of storms, Vickie called, but Leigh didn't answer. Vickie left work at 8:45 a.m. and returned home to find the garage door open and the light still on, meaning it had been activated just a few minutes prior to her arrival. When she approached the house, she found the front door unlocked. When she went inside, she was faced with a parent's worst nightmare. Blood was pooled in the hallway and splattered on the walls, and Leigh was nowhere to be found. When investigators arrived on the scene, they found no signs of forced entry into the home. However, there were signs that a struggle had occurred. Blood was smeared in the hallway, bathroom, and on Leigh's bedroom door. There was a blood trail found leading from the hallway to the living room, as well as blood and hair stuck to the door frame. This indicates Leigh had hit her head during the struggle. Blood found in the bathroom appeared to have been cleaned up around the counter and sink. As well, one of her nightgowns and her bra were found, blood-stained, in her laundry hamper. This suggested to police she'd incurred an injury above the neck, something that was further corroborated by a fist-sized pool of blood on the carpet. According to investigators, this was consistent with someone of Leigh's height having received an injury to the head and suggested that she may have laid on the carpet for a short time before being moved. Later blood typing revealed the blood likely had belonged to Leigh. However, as DNA testing was still in its infancy, no tests had been performed to determine conclusively it was hers. The two police officers who arrived at the scene spoke to Vickie, realized the situation's urgency, and called lead detective Bart Aguirre for backup. Aguirre was teaching a course on fingerprinting at the North Mississippi Law Enforcement Training Center that morning when he received the call. When he got to the house, he found Vickie and her estranged second husband, Barney Yarborough, a reporter, and the two responding officers in front of the home. Other than the blood evidence, nothing else was out of place in the house. The only items missing were Leigh's shoes, reading glasses, some of her underclothes, and a sleeping bag. Police began searching the area with canines, covering a half-mile radius around the house that same morning. But the weather made it impossible for the dogs to pick up a scent. Despite all efforts, no sign of Leigh's whereabouts could be found. Given that the front door was unlocked, it's believed Leigh opened the door to her attacker. It was apparent to her family that she likely knew the perpetrator, as she didn't speak to strangers. Police could not determine if Leigh had left the house on foot or if she'd been placed in a vehicle. They were sure the assailant had an hour to an hour and a half to commit the crime, given the timeline Vickie had provided. This meant they couldn't have gotten far, especially as, according to Vickie's statement, the light on the garage door opener was still on when she arrived home, meaning she likely missed the perpetrator by mere minutes. Investigators scoured a 10-foot ditch running alongside the property and then turned their attention to a nearby wooded area. Along with this initial search, investigators spoke with locals, walked through vacant lots and overgrown land. They searched through the Knox landfill in Chickasaw County and used bloodhounds to search the family's vehicles. Residents joined the effort across Tupelo, and aerial searches were conducted just a day later. There was a focus on places where Leigh could have hidden if she were lost or injured, but it soon became clear to all involved that they were looking for a body. 1 week after her disappearance, a $1,000 reward was offered in the hopes it would prompt anyone with information to come forward. Just 2 weeks later, it was doubled. As months went by, investigators grew more frustrated. They were certain that Leigh had been a victim of foul play, but they continued to come up empty in their search for physical evidence. Vickie, annoyed that police believed her daughter was dead, hired a private investigator to start looking the case over from the beginning. She also announced that she was raising the reward for information about Leigh from $2,000 to $5,000. About 1 month after Leigh's disappearance, her glasses arrived at her residence by mail. They were addressed to B. Yarborough. Leigh's stepfather was named Barney Yarborough. He and Leigh's mother had separated a short time before Leigh's disappearance. The street name on the envelope was misspelled, and the envelope had 6 stamps, twice as many as was needed. There was nothing else in the package. Handwriting and forensic tests on the envelope yielded no results. The stamps had been wet with water, and there was no DNA on the envelope. Aguirre stated he felt the glasses were mailed as a distraction. He said, quote, "There was no ransom letter or anything like that came with those glasses. It was just those glasses. You would think if it was an actual kidnapping, you would have expected a little more to come along with that." The person who mailed the envelope has never been identified. It was postmarked Boonville, Mississippi, a town about 30 miles north of Tupelo. A student working the drive-thru at a McDonald's in Boonville allegedly spotted Leigh sitting in a truck being driven by an African-American male. The man drove off before the employee could get a better look at her, but detectives were able to track down the driver who produced the girl he had been driving with that day. She was not Leigh Occhi, and the man was cleared of all involvement in the case. 14 months after Leigh's disappearance, a farmer harvesting soybeans was surprised to find a human skull in his field. He immediately called the police, who did a cursory look at the area but didn't find any other bones. The skull was sent to the state medical examiner's office to attempt to identify it using dental records. Just 4 days later, it was announced that the skull did not belong to Leigh, but to a young adult woman between 18 and 30. A recovery team was sent out to the area where the skull had been found, and a few hours later they announced that they had recovered the rest of the remains. Everyone put in the effort to find the missing 13-year-old, but to no avail. However, law enforcement was not without their suspects. There had been whispers from the very beginning that Vickie might have been involved. Even those who didn't believe that she had actually committed the crime herself believed that she knew more than she was telling police. Investigators had Vickie come in for 3 different polygraphs, but she failed each time. Still, they were hesitant to name her as a suspect. The tests were given by officials from both local law enforcement and the FBI. Barney and Donald also agreed to take polygraphs, but passed and were ruled out as suspects. It's important to note that polygraph tests have a history of being inaccurate, which is why they are rarely relied upon as evidence and are not likely to be admissible in court in the United States at all. Barney was able to provide a substantial alibi during his days of interrogation and is said to have been forthcoming and cooperative throughout the course of the investigation. Donald was able to obtain an emergency 1-month leave, after which he temporarily moved to Tupelo to help aid in the search for his daughter. According to Donald, Vickie had initially played down Leigh's disappearance, having given him the impression she'd simply run away. However, after arriving in Tupelo, he had suspicions that Vickie had potentially been involved. This was further fueled by local residents who told him to look at her mother. From the get-go, Donald shared that he felt Leigh was deceased and that someone had entered the home and beat her to death. There were rumors of abuse at home. Leigh came to school with bruises and even with a black eye. When her teachers asked about the injuries, she would blame her horseback riding. When at a day camp, Leigh was said to have broken down crying at the thought of returning home, and neighbors gossiped about Vickie's ex, Barney, having locked Leigh out of the house on at least one occasion. Leigh also confessed to being afraid of her stepfather. As the weeks and months passed, rumors circulated regarding Leigh's disappearance. One stated that Barney had been abusive toward his stepdaughter, while another said that a local doctor had abducted her and buried her in a local barn. The latter resulted in investigators instating a gag order as they found the rumors were influencing the case. Officers found breaching the gag order were threatened with a 2-week suspension from the force. Despite all the gossip floating around, Detective Aguirre felt that Vickie's version of what had happened on the morning Leigh vanished was incomplete, but admitted that it would have been nearly impossible for her to kill Leigh and hide the body. When the detective arrived at the crime scene, the blood in the home was still fresh and hadn't started to congeal. This indicated that it hadn't been there for much longer than 15 minutes, and Vickie had been out of the house for more than an hour. In the eyes of the police, this cleared her of being the perpetrator. Vickie had her own suspicions about who had taken her daughter. She believed a local man named Oscar Mike Kearns was responsible for Leigh's disappearance. He was a Sunday school teacher who worked at Holy Trinity Lutheran Church, which Leigh attended with her grandparents. He had shared Leigh's love of horses and horseback riding, and had asked Leigh if she'd want to go riding sometime. It was believed Kearns would have been able to enter the house as he was familiar to Leigh. This would have made it simple to get in, using the weather as a ruse. In May of 1993, 9 months after Leigh went missing, Kearns abducted a 15-year-old girl whom he'd met through church as well. He kidnapped her under the guise of driving her to school. Instead, he took her to a field where he sexually assaulted her before dropping her off at school. Upon arriving, she contacted the police. Kearns was arrested and he later pled guilty to his crimes. He was sentenced to 24 years with 16 suspended, but served less than 4. He was released in October 1997. Not long after this, he kidnapped a married couple and sexually assaulted the wife. For this, he was sent back to prison. According to Vickie, he has also been linked to 2 other disappearances in the Tupelo area. In regards to Leigh's disappearance, he has refused to be interviewed or take a polygraph test. Oscar Kearns has never been charged in connection to the case. Leigh Occhi has been missing since August 27, 1992. At the time of her disappearance, she was 13 years old, 4'10", and weighed around 95 pounds. She had light blonde hair and hazel eyes and had a strawberry birthmark on the back of her neck. Each ear was pierced once, and she wore glasses for reading. Donald Occhi took great lengths to ensure people didn't forget about his daughter's case. He distributed flyers to bus services, local businesses, and truck drivers. He had Leigh's information sent to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children and Child Quest. He also turned to psychics for help, who all claimed that a body of water was somehow related to the case. Donald has since remarried and started a family. He hopes Leigh died the same day she disappeared, so that she didn't suffer. At the time of this video, Leigh would be 42 years old. This case still remains open. If you have any information, please contact the Tupelo Police Department at 662-841-6491 or the FBI at 202-324-3000. Tips can also be submitted anonymously through Crime Stoppers of Northeast Mississippi at 1-800-773-8477. Thank you for watching. Please be sure to download Homescapes in the description below and try it out. Trying my sponsors gets them to come back for more business and directly creates more content for all of you. And be sure to subscribe and turn on all notifications now, because you won't want to miss what's next. You may also need to turn on notifications for the YouTube app itself on your phone if you haven't done that yet. Otherwise, the app will be unable to utilize the notifications that you've turned on. So thank you to all of you who do, and I'll see you next time.